Here we go.
Hi, everyone. My name is Shana Burres. I'm actually Dr. Shana Burres. I am the program manager for the Alliance Cares program. So this is a really, it's an honor and a treat for me to be in this room because Luann and I work together just about every day, overseeing these events, overseeing our mentor team, the connector, our community groups that are happening in the local area, as well as our trainings, the topic support groups, and these special events. So I know a lot about the administrative piece of running cares and helping all of these things happen. I don't as often get to be part of them, especially not as a speaker and especially not in the room with so many wonderful caregivers. So I'm really excited to be here with you all today. And I'm grateful that Luann is letting me step in and talk to you today a little bit about from survival to healing. So my background is I and my family were licensed foster parents for about 7 years. We were a Mockingbird hub home, and then we were also a DCYF licensed foster home. We had in those roles, we think somewhere around 40 to 45 children and youth come through our home. We were licensed 0 to 18, and we were distinguished as a medically complex home. So we had a lot of different needs represented in the wonderful children that we got to spend time with here in our space. And so that is how I ended up coming to the work of CARES as a fellow caregiver. I understand so much what it is to welcome a child into your home and to have to discover who they are and how I can best support them and what their needs are and why they're reacting the way they're reacting, which is a bit about what we're going to talk about today. My academic background is I have a PhD in psychology, hence my discussion about trauma and how trauma impacts our learning and our actions. I also have a master's in education, and my undergrad is in public health. So I'm really committed to the idea of what it means to be wholly healthy. We as humans, the way we interact with each other, and the way that we interact with the space we're in tells a lot about who we are and how we're becoming healthy. The great news about everything I've learned in my background and in my education is humans are really plastic. And I don't know if you all know that term. I don't mean that, like that song, I'm a Barbie girl in a Barbie world, that I am literally plastic. Plastic also means malleable and growing and ever changing. And humans are that. So, however, you are showing up in this room today, however, the children in your home are showing up today, the good news is that you and they won't be the same tomorrow. You and they won't be the same in 10 years. And we can do really concrete things to help ourselves and the people that we live with and live around move and grow, use that plasticity to grow and change in a way that benefits them and benefits us. And so our talk today is going to be just sort of a survey, an overview of what intergenerational trauma is, how it happens, how it impacts us, and then, of course, what are a few things that you can do for yourself and for the other people that are in your home, and especially for the children that you're welcoming into your home, to help them use that ability to change and grow in ways that are healthy and that are responsive to who they are. And so you're going to unfortunately have to listen to me lecture for a little bit. It is not my favorite approach, but it is the best way to do this. And then at the end, we'll have a Q&A session. We'll turn off the recording so that you can just speak freely. It won't then be captured in any way. In the meantime, if you have questions while I go through the slides, feel free to drop them in the chat. You can drop them directly to Luann Marshall if you want them to remain a little more private or if you want her to summarize them for you. You're also welcome to just drop them in the main chat. When I'm done with the presentation portion, I'll go over to the chat and Luann and I will make sure that I do my best to answer the questions that you have. You are also welcome at the end to simply use the raise your hand feature and you can ask me the question directly. So that's the agenda for today. Before I share my screen and get into the presentation, do any of you have any questions that are not specific to your case or to people because we're in the recording piece, but do you have anything that you need me to clarify before I move forward? Okay, here we go. From survival to healing, responding to intergenerational trauma. So we are in this beautiful fall winter season. There are a lot of holidays and celebrations and family things that tend to happen between sort of the start of school, September, and the hallmark of the new year in January. And certainly in our house, we have some traditions that are tied to these types of holidays. One of them, no, that's not quite accurate. Many of them are tied to food. In our house, we have something that has lovingly been dubbed peanut butter num nums. They're something that my husband's mom made when he was growing up. It's two Ritz crackers, peanut butter in the middle, dipped in chocolate. And they have taken over not only our little nuclear household, but now my parents and my siblings and their spouses and their children, and several of our friends that are like family, our chosen family in the community, uh, really demand peanut butter num nums from us. This is something that has become an embedded part of the holiday tradition for now something like 10 or 15 families. We used to buy a little box of Ritz crackers and we would use the peanut butter we already had in the cupboard. And now we are absolutely having to buy a Costco amount of the Ritz crackers. We buy the double pack of Costco peanut butter, and it is all we can do to keep up with the demand. So I imagine that many of you in this room have some food that is very traditional to your family, to your chosen family, to your biological family, and some holiday that is significant to you. And it has a way of finding space and growing into places. I heard a story about another family that had ham every year for Christmas, and it was the family's central piece. They have ham for Christmas. What was interesting is that they had this pattern as a whole family group. It was the grandmother and several children, and then their spouses, and now the grandkids were getting to be of age where they were starting to cook. And one of the grandchildren got a hold of her grandma and said, Grandma, can you explain this recipe to me? I know that when I'm baking the ham, I need to trim the ends of the ham off before I put it in the pan and we cook it. And the grandma started laughing and told her grandchild, "Oh my goodness, why are you trimming the ends of the ham off? That's so funny." And she said, "Well, but that's the recipe you gave to mom and mom gave to me, and this is how we do it." And sort of the family was gathered. Yes, of course. When you have to cook a ham, you cut the ends of the ham off. And now the grandma is really just kind of bent over. She's really laughing about this. And she said, "No, that isn't part of the recipe. I've just always done that. I learned that from my mom. We had this really small stove in the 1930s, and the oven wasn't big enough for the pan that had the whole ham. So we would just trim the ends of the ham off so it would fit in the pan, so it would fit in this small oven." And so now we've had four generations. It was the fourth generation, the great grandma, the grandma, the parent, and now the grandchild who is trimming the ends of the ham off solely because three generations before them, the size of the stove was not conducive to the shape that a ham normally came in. And so they were just trimming the ends of it off. Okay, why am I telling you a story about ham and peanut butter num nums? Um, that is, to my mind, one of the most perfect descriptions of intergenerational trauma. It is something that was done for good purpose, right? They couldn't cook the ham without trimming it down. That action served an actual good and helpful purpose. It helped feed the family. There was a measure of waste. It was maybe not ideal, but it was ideal for that situation and for that family and for those moments. And because it was established in this family, sort of this critical juncture where this grandmother or this matriarch passed along the recipe, that part of the recipe didn't get explained. It just got moved forward. And so every cook after that picked up that same habit. And of course, that habit no longer served. And at some point, nobody even understood why they were doing it. It was so embedded, it was so familiar, it was so locked into who they were that they didn't stop to think, is this action serving me? Is this action reasonable? Is it something that I need to continue doing for my own well being and my ability to meet the needs of my family as it stands right now? And of course, it didn't. And once that was cleared up, everybody felt free to follow the recipe, but maybe not the trimmed ends piece of it. And so I think that to me is something I want you to bring with you as we continue to talk about this. Intergenerational trauma is the reaction to a need for safety. It is the result of what happens when humans do what we do so well, which is stay alive. We do what we have to stay safe, to keep moving forward, to keep our children safe and well, and having their most basic needs met. And so even if some of these things show up in a way that are no longer helpful, and in some cases, the patterns and the reactions are actually harmful. They come from a place of survival, and we don't want to vilify them by themselves, but we do want to take a good hard look at them so that we don't need to keep trimming off pieces of the ham when those might be someone's favorite piece, and we do actually need them to serve and feed everybody. Okay, so what is intergenerational trauma? In the simplest terms, trauma itself is a behavioral response to an experience that was too much, it was too fast, or it was too soon. And when that trauma is passed along to future generations through genetics, through family practices like the ham, or through cultural practices, whole communities can display this intergenerational trauma. Then it becomes intergenerational. So grandkids, great grandkids are adopting and using survival strategies that no longer serve them, and in some cases, again, harm them. And so the majority of the research that has contributed to what is considered intergenerational, or often to shorten to generational trauma, really began with Jewish families whose members had direct experience in the Holocaust. And then that was quickly translated, new research became around Black and BIPOC families who can trace their lineage to the US slave trade. And so those two bodies of research were able to follow family lines back to situations that were known significant traumas, both for the individual and the community experiencing that. And that was an important part of that research because what it allowed those researchers to see and tease out is that intergenerational trauma impacts the individual, it impacts the family, it impacts the community, but not always in the same way or to the same degree, despite having it be the similar or the same circumstance. And so, for you in this room right now, especially you as you are serving children and young people who are coming into care, we know that the act of coming into foster care, being removed by the state system and placed with a relative or placed with a foster home, that itself is trauma. So every child and young person you interact with, we know has at least one significant trauma. We also know statistically that the fact that they're coming into care means likely that their parents also suffered significant trauma somewhere in their past. And so we know then, based on this research, that the children and the young people coming into our home are going to have reactions that are based on survival strategies that are encoded in their genetics. It's this research on the families, the Jewish families and the Black families, where they were able to really just draw these direct lines. What they found is it's actually encoded into the DNA to have this slightly heightened fight, flight, freeze response, which often is seen as, Well, fight, flight, freeze, right? It can come out in outbursts of anger or pushing back, or what can feel like defiance. It can feel like shutting down, things that aren't necessarily productive for strong relationships, for building connection, for being able to work as a collaborative family. And so when the research was able to tease that out, it allows us to start with compassion, to say that these actions aren't towards us as individuals. They are a survival response that's coded in their bodies, that's coded in their actions. And when children see their parents behave in ways that they inherited, both in their DNA and in their familial and community behavior, they mimic those behaviors, just like cutting off the ends of the ham, right? They've seen their parent cook the ham that way 100 times, maybe not 100, I don't know, 20 times, right? Every Thanksgiving for their whole lives. And they then automatically trim it off without giving it any thought. And so we want to bring that compassion with. The other piece of compassion that I want us to think about and bring with today is that it is very likely that you, as your own self, are carrying something of this. It might be a lot. I don't know your story and I don't want to make an assumption about who you are. But I can pretty safely assume that the majority of us in this room have something that is a personal trauma. If you're familiar with the ACEs, the adverse childhood experiences, you can go and find that. There's a marker of 10 of them. Likely you have one of them at least. And for many of you, your families have had experiences that mean that they experienced ACEs and they did too, and you've brought some of that forward. So we need to also be kind to ourselves as you think through these things, and maybe as you experience something that feels pretty yucky with a child or a young person in your home, that you recognize, oh, that is my inheritance that I get to work through. Now, before I move through this slide, I have one last thing I want to say. Trauma and fight, flight, freeze, these safety responses are not the only thing that are inherited from families, communities, and individuals who've experienced trauma. Resilience is inherited too. And so we should never miss the opportunity to celebrate and acknowledge the resilience and the beauty that families, individuals, and communities have built out of these catastrophic experiences. It is not only one, it's both together. And the children and the young people in your home are bringing with them both things. They're bringing reactions that don't fit because of this history of trauma and family cycles. And they're bringing with some really incredible skills to overcome those things. Okay. Resilience and strength. I got ahead of myself. Here it is. Trauma is not the defining characteristic of a person, of a family, or a community. It's not your defining characteristic if that's something you've faced. And it is certainly not the defining characteristic of the children and the young people in your home or their parents and their biological family if that isn't you. If you're a foster parent and you're welcoming a child you're not related to, um, this trauma, the family trauma, the individual trauma, is not their defining characteristic. It is not the thing that we should judge or measure them on. And certainly also because those experiences create resilience, they create creativity, they create strength, they create family responses and systems and patterns that actually serve each other really well. And so we want to bring both of those things, along with the acknowledgement that the same experience, even for a sibling set, that might be too much, too fast, or too soon for one of the siblings may not even rate at all for the other sibling. A pattern of behavior that becomes deeply embedded in one child in a family unit may be completely missed by another child in a family unit. So while we are talking about a type of trauma that's transmitted between individuals, especially between families and communities, it's important to acknowledge that we're all individuals and that every child you welcome into your home is their own person. And just because their family has had a particular experience does not mean that that's at the root of their behavior. If their behavior is rising to something that my suggestions, our conversation today doesn't serve, please look into formal therapy. Please look into the resources that are available to children and youth in care. It is not our place to figure out the root of a child's behavior. It's our place to welcome them with safety and to use some strategies to help them develop new patterns. And we can talk a bit more about that at the end if needed. Okay, so what are these impacts? The impacts of intergenerational trauma do actually change the genetics. And I mentioned this already, but you see it in a couple different ways. When it's solo to the individual, meaning usually the young child, a baby or developing toddler, who's experiencing it directly, it changes their brain, their amygdala, that fight, flight, freeze response area, overdevelops, and their other aspects, the executive function, the limbic system that is about control and monitoring, underdevelops. And that's because they are responding to keeping themselves safe. They're sort of on guard all the time. When this is a family pattern, this and it can have an impact on the gene expression itself. And so that gets passed on through the genetics, just in the creation of a new human, but also in the intrauterine environment, these things can be passed on. So that's how it shows up in genetics, in those neural pathways, that early brain development. It also shows up in things like values and beliefs, these social and personal drivers of behavior. So the reasons that I do what I do are my personal drivers. And my family environment and the values my family has, the way that they react when things go poorly, what is a disappointment, what is not a disappointment, what is applauded, what is not applauded. All of those things teach me how to react to the world and how to stay safe. And then that comes forward with me even outside of my family. So that's the values and beliefs component, and that's passed not just through the parents, but through the entire family system, and that's chosen family or biological family, whoever's influencing the children and the young people. And then lastly, through the behavior, and I sort of did these in reverse order, but the behavior, as I explained at the beginning, the way that I am reacting or a child or a young person is reacting, really heightened responses to what should be a minor thing. We would say maybe don't cry over spilled milk. Spilled milk is not a big deal. But if safety, if the need for safety has been learned, if a heightened fight, flight, freeze has been learned or given through genetics, that might be not just crying, that might be full shutdown or full meltdown. So this is how intergenerational trauma shows up in individuals, but also you'll see this interacting within family systems and within sort of the community at large. It increases the chance for chronic and complex stress in individuals as well, and that chronic and complex stress then contributes to brain chemistry for the individual, for the intrauterine environment, and therefore for every child that is born into that family system or into that family unit. Okay, so we've talked about what happens with the trauma, how it's passed on, how it shows up in our brains and our bodies. Thankfully, that isn't the end of the story. Just like trauma can create certain behaviors that are difficult or doesn't serve the child or the young person, trauma changes the brain and our behavior, but so does healing. Healing changes our brain, our actual neural wiring. It changes our body, the way those genes are expressed and used. When we come down off of chronic stress, it changes the way our bodies function, and we can do that for ourselves, and we can invite the children and the young people in our home into that as well. I love this quote. I use it a lot for myself and for the people that I get to support day to day. It's an adaptation of a quote from Dr. Jen Wolkin. She is a clinical psychologist and a trauma specialist. She does really fantastic work around healing sort of generational trauma and deep complex trauma. So I hope if you take nothing else with you today, this is the quote I hope you take with you. That trauma changes the brain, it changes our behavior, but so does healing. So let's talk about how that healing can happen. Healing begins with, I've distilled it to you for three simple things through connection, through co-regulation, and through creation. So first is connection. We have to move from that fight, flight, freeze response. We have to move into settled safety. And the way that you do that is through connection. Humans, we are tribal, we are herd animals, if you're okay with that language. We need each other. We live and we grow and we survive because of each other. So we begin with connection. We need safety, we need consistency, and children and young people who've never had safety and consistency, or their safety has been really inconsistent, and that's pretty much the 100% of the children and the young people that are coming into care have had one or both of those to some degree. They need you to help them find that safety and consistency. In the same way that when an infant is crying, the caregiver, the parent, or the babysitter, the grandparent, whomever, needs to pick them up and help them figure out how to soothe their bodies, soothe their needs. It's maybe they're hungry, but we meet their needs for them to help them calm down and find safety and peace. The same is true for every human, regardless of age. If you have not learned to find connection on yourself, to regulate yourself, that is needed through that connected relationship. It might be your best friend or your spouse or your parent, but you have to start with connection. And that moves to that co-regulation piece. That's calming that nervous center through connection. Co-regulation does not necessarily mean touch. For some people, touch is a big part of it. A big, deep hug with deep pressure is a phenomenal and really effective way to co-regulate and help kick in that parasympathetic nervous system to calm each other down. But touch isn't always the thing. It might be breathing together. When my teenagers would be having a really hard time, and teenagers have big feelings for really good reasons, I would ask them to breathe with me. I would just say, let's just stand and breathe together. And if they're into music, put music on and use that rhythm. But box breathing is a really powerful, really simple tool. It's breathe in for 4, hold for 4, breathe out for 4, hold for 4. And you just repeat that. And if you can get them to do it with you, with littler kids, I tend to make big motions with my hands. I'll say, breathe with me, or some other funny body movement. But if you can get them breathing with you and mimicking your motion, that's instant connection, and it will begin to help them re-regulate and calm down into that co-regulation. You're helping them find that. And then the last piece that you can do for them is creation. This is creating new experiences and new patterns. And there's a number of psychological principles that are behind this. But one of the ones that may be familiar to this room because it's pretty broadly popular is cognitive behavioral therapy. There's something called behavioral activation. Basically, it's the idea that once you can identify and name the emotion or the response that you're having, then you can replace it with a different action or response. So if every time you ask the child in your home to brush your teeth, they absolutely lose their cool. If you can help them figure out why they do not want to brush their teeth, it could be for a myriad of reasons. You replace that with a different behavior. So you make teeth brushing more fun. You connect it to something else. You move the time of day that you're doing it. I know morning and best is best, and morning and before bed is best, but maybe you move it to a time of day where they aren't being triggered by whatever else is happening. And maybe you change the type of toothbrush or the toothpaste, or maybe you change the room you're doing it in, right? You go to the kitchen instead and dance around, or there's many ways that you can create new experiences. So I just described a way that you can reframe a particular experience, but creating new experiences also is simply creating novel experiences. If you yourself have never had an opportunity to go get a massage, that new experience might be worth it for you. If the child in your home has never had the experience of walking through the woods when the leaves are crunchy, I think we've missed that. It's pouring rain for me now. The leaves are soggy, but Maybe walking through soggy leaves is an experience they've never had. Creating those new experiences and doing it with them begins to rewrite some of that hyper response, some of that fight, flight, freeze. And when you have enough new, safe, regulated, connected experiences, that begins to become the normal pattern of behavior, the standard baseline. And that's true for you and friends, your relatives. This is not specific only to kids in care. This is for all of us. And so, what does it look like to begin creating together? If you've connected, you've built connection through safety and trust, you're showing up, you're being consistent, you yourself are finding stability and regulation in yourself so that you can then co regulate. And I'm going to just pause here because it does start with you. Let me say, none of us, that perfect isn't a thing. No human is perfectly regulated all the time. That actually wouldn't be safe because sometimes we need to be upset. We need to be angry. We need our feelings are correct and appropriate, and we are overwhelmed and we are stressed out and we are learning something about what we need. And that's not the moment to then demand of ourselves that we can regulate, connect, co regulate, and create. That's a moment where we ask for grace to say, I really want to help you. But either, hopefully, you're co parenting with somebody, your co parent can step in to be the one to connect, co regulate, and create. Or if the child is old enough, you can ask them for a moment and you can just own, I'm having a really hard time right now. I would like to help you feel better, but I don't feel good myself. Can we sit and read a story together? Or do you think that we could just skip making a big dinner and can we do cereal or whatever it is that helps you own that regulation and connection comes from all of the people involved. And so please be sure to hold grace and space for yourself, that perfect isn't a thing, and that because it does start with us as the caregivers, we also need to have the ability to find safety and stability within ourselves before we expect ourselves to be able to co-regulate. But the more we practice these things, the easier it gets for everyone involved, including our co-parents, including the other children in our home and the children that we are serving. So I wanted to make sure we say that. So it does. It starts with you. It starts with you recognizing that every person you interact with, including yourself, has inherited patterns, both in our genes, in our neurology. We've developed neurology, we've developed reactions that were there to keep us safe and that may no longer be actually keeping us safe. Or even if it keeps us safe, that's all it's doing. It's not helping us to learn, to grow, and to thrive and do better. And so we want to change that. We can do that really easily by having fun early and often. Laughter, shared laughter especially, is unparalleled when it comes to creating connection and helping to co-regulate. Same thing with music together. It doesn't have to be good. You can sing terribly along with whatever type of music you like. You can beat out a rhythm on the table during dinner. That is something our family did a lot. When dinner time got squirrely, we're fairly musical. So someone would start drumming and then everyone would come in with different parts. That shared action, especially when it's fun and creative and spontaneous, really does build connection. It helps everybody come to the same sort of heart rhythm and breathing at the same time. And that experience of fun is creating safety, is creating new neurology, saying, this is safe, this is fun, I get to do this, I am okay. And then show up with consistency. Consistency does not mean perfection. We do not have to bat 1,000 to have this be really impactful and really powerful. It just means consistent. And part of that consistency is when you get it wrong, owning it and apologizing, which means you need to pay attention to the triggers. That's your own triggers. What are the things that make you very quickly unsettled? And the same thing for the children, your spouse, your partner, your co-parent, your best friend, them too, but certainly the children in your home. What makes them react in a way that seems disproportionate to the action? When you figure those things out, that's when you can begin to create new responses in those places. And there's a lot of ways to do that. One of them is to plan an interruption. So when something is going off the rails, sometimes we just need to be sort of shook, figuratively, we need to be shook out of that mindset or that pattern. An example of this is when my children were small and they would get very loud. And as you can probably tell from this, I have a big voice. My voice is quite loud when I want it to be, and it's a useful tool if I need to get people's attention. It's not great for me to yell at my children to get their attention. It's scary. It isn't the best use of my big voice. Frankly, it didn't work all that well. So when they would be getting too loud for them to hear me call for them, I spent a little time learning how to sing. So I can fake opera singing quite well. I would just burst into song, into the most ridiculous operatic version of the instructions I needed them to do. It was an interruption. It, it was very unexpected, but it wasn't scary because it was really silly. And they learned pretty quickly that once they heard me sort of singing the instructions in this like fake soprano, very falsetto, high operatic style, that they moved too far and they needed to pay attention. An interruption can look like lots of things, whatever works for you. What's important is that that interruption feels safe, that you feel in control of it, and that there is some element of fun in it. And fun is whatever is fun for you and your family. It definitely does not have to look like what I chose to do. I just did that because that was the skill I happened to have. And as I mentioned before, repairing when things go poorly is really important. It is the cornerstone of that connection, of the consistency, and the ability to co regulate. We trust people who are honest with us, and perfect isn't a thing. I'm not perfect. You are not perfect. The children in our home are not perfect. Life is really imperfect. So things are not always going to go the way we want. And that includes our response sometimes. So when things go poorly, own it, apologize, do something to repair it. And in demonstrating that, not only are you creating safety, not only are you reinforcing that connection and the co-regulation, but you're creating opportunities for the children and young people in your home to learn how to do the same. They will be better. They will feel safer, stronger, more stable in every relationship going forward because they've learned to do that repair. And lastly, because perfect isn't a thing and because life is messy and comes at us in lots of different ways, especially as foster parents and relative caregivers, celebrate every ounce of growth. Celebrate every chance you get when you've repaired, when you all have managed to connect, when you've tried something new, when you've, created something new. Celebrate those moments, celebrate them big, celebrate them loud, celebrate them in whatever way uh, honors your family's culture and patterns and the children in your home. Let them help you pick the celebrations. That could be a silly dance, it could be an action, it could be, if you have teenagers, man, some form of digital balloons or GIF or whatever it is. Find a way to celebrate every ounce of growth. It will also get that locked into your neurology that this is worth celebrating, that these are good things, that these actions are working, so that when it gets hard again, you'll have that deeply anchored that these are now your survival strategies. It's to connect, to co-regulate, and to create something new together. So here is a summary for you all. Intergenerational trauma, it's an inherited response to events that were too much, too fast, and too soon for an individual. It could be for a family, or it could be for a whole community. And in some cases, it's true for all three of those simultaneously and separately. Intergenerational trauma, as the same as individual trauma, impacts the body, the brain, and behavior. When it's inherited, it's even more significant than an individual's experience with a singular trauma or even a complex trauma. And while healing while trauma impacts our brains, our bodies, and our behaviors, healing also changes the brain, the body, and the behavior. Don't forget, that's the quote I want you to take with, right? Just like trauma changes the brain and the body and the behavior, so does healing. Healing changes it too. And your keys to moving this forward for yourself and for your family, for the children and the young people in your home are connection, connect to them, create safety, create relational trust, co-regulation when they cannot calm themselves, when they cannot make themselves feel safe. Do that with them in a way that you figured out works for you and them. And then create new patterns, create new habits, create new memories, create new experiences so that you can rewrite what their brain and their body and their behavior is saying and doing so that it serves who they are becoming in the future. All right, that is the end of the formal presentation.